Ukraine and Russia are in secret talks on energy attacks and NATO in exchange for territories, though it's on hold. Joe Biden is concerned about North Korean troops. Join Iryna Uzlova and Valeriy Klochok from the Vezha Center live on YouTube 24 for discussion. Valeria, congratulations. Glory to the heroes. Congratulations. If you have any questions, clarifications, or just want to ask something, please feel free to contact us via chat. The Financial Times publishes a lengthy article citing sources with knowledge of the matter, stating that Ukraine and Russia are holding preliminary talks to end attacks on each other's energy infrastructure. According to the interlocutors, talks that nearly reached an agreement in August, but were disrupted by Ukraine's invasion of the Kursk region. Preliminary talks on energy facilities are ongoing. This agreement, if reached, could be the most significant de-escalation since Russia's full-scale invasion. A senior Ukrainian official stated that Russia and Ukraine have been cooperating recently, reducing attacks on each other's energy infrastructure. However, while Ukrainian forces advance in Kursk, Putin is expected to target Zelensky's energy facilities. It's uncertain whether Putin will agree to halt shelling of energy infrastructure, as Ukrainian troops control about 600 kilometers of the Kursk region. What can we understand about these negotiations and the prospects for their practical realization? And how can we even believe this question from a dictator who constantly violates all the agreements he makes? In general, yes, the story is not new, and it dates back to the founding peace summit in Switzerland, as preliminary agreements were reached there between our allies, supporters, and neutral countries. There are three tracks to be discussed: humanitarian, food, and energy. The humanitarian track is being discussed with Canada, the food track with Turkey, and the energy track with Qatar. The Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, is also involved in this process. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky partially confirmed the information, supporting the Financial Times report that there were preliminary agreements not to target energy infrastructure before the military operation in the Kursk region. The end of the summer was very difficult for Ukraine, as we know, with blackouts, and even the beginning of September was marked by them. But there will be fewer outages, and indeed, we can now observe that there are fewer attacks on energy facilities. They are happening, and the frontline regions are suffering from these strikes in particular. Last week, we recorded emergency blackouts there, but as for the rest of Ukraine, we do not record such strikes. What we do have are daily flights of dozens or even up to 100 Shaheds, and there are really few missiles. Shaheds cause a lot of trouble for Ukraine. Unfortunately, there are casualties. The areas that are closer to the front line are under rocket fire. Without exaggeration, there are missiles, but their number is much smaller, and unfortunately, Putin is now targeting civilian objects in the vast majority. This supports the Financial Times report that he intends to conquer territory. Frontline events confirm this, and energy infrastructure, particularly nuclear and energy security, has been a significant topic in negotiations with Russia through third parties. It's natural for us to react strongly, and sometimes unacceptably, to any negotiations with the Russians. But, as Defense Minister Umerov himself confirmed just last week, negotiations with Russia have been going on since 2022 and have not stopped in principle. In terms of the issues we are raising, yes, they do exist. These are contacts between the special services, exchanges of prisoners are ongoing. The President of Ukraine frequently reports on prisoner exchanges and agreements reached. The return of prisoners has been facilitated by a significant exchange fund of Russian prisoners, largely due to the Kursk military operation. The Russians will not like this and are trying to drive the Ukrainian armed forces out of the area. The situation there is not very simple. It's not an easy walk through the territory of Russia and gaining positions there. It also means losses among our military, loss of military equipment, etc. There are many conflicting opinions on its feasibility. But articles like this one in the Financial Times and others show that the Kursk operation did become one of the arguments for putting pressure on Putin. Of course, he did not throw his hands up and surrender, saying, "That's it. I will not strike at the territories of Ukraine," and so on. This is true, but the contacts remain. They really do exist. And the publication writes about this for a reason. I think it's too early to say whether there will be any progress or not. I would note another point. The fact that the Russian side is already showing readiness for dialogue today will not be a simple process. It will be too complicated. The appearance of this information shows that contacts are taking place, that information is being exchanged between Russia and Ukraine through the mediation of third parties. Various parties are actively involved in this process, not only Qatar, but also Turkey. Last week, UN Secretary General Guterres, whom we rightly criticized here, emphasized the importance of Erdogan in the negotiation process because he was hugging and shaking hands with Putin. Yes, but it should still be noted that today Erdogan remains one of the key mediators, as was the case with the grain deal. He constantly says that this is his merit, and India joined this process, among other things. India has been less successful so far, but has high potential due to its leverage over Russia from reduced oil purchases and military component supplies. While this is concerning, Narendra Modi is showing interest in the issue. We can expect more information on negotiations, considering Ukrainian society's mixed attitudes toward the process. As I explore further, I hear more statements suggesting that negotiations may occur. Recently, President Zelensky stated that the main task is to compel Russia to negotiate. Andriy Yermak, head of Zelensky's office, also mentioned that current efforts are focused on starting negotiations. Even Putin indicated a willingness for compromises, but the Kursk operation disrupted everything. He considers not only the Kursk operation, but also Zelensky's plan a flaw. Russia will seek reasons to claim that either we or Ukraine are not ready or to raise counter-demands. This is a normal situation in the negotiation process between warring parties, where one side disagrees with the other's terms. This publication reports on reduced strikes on energy facilities, indicates agreements exist. Saudi Arabia also states that it is ready to mediate negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, as Saudi ambassador to Moscow, Abdul Rahman bin Sulaiman Al Ahmad says. Many people want to negotiate, but it's unclear if Putin is interested and under what terms, possibly from a position of strength. The New York Times mentions secret points of Zelensky's plan, including tomahawks, suggesting this may have significance. This is a kind of controlled leak of information about secret locations to show that if you do not make adequate agreements that are in line not with Marasmus ideas on the ground, but with the UN Charter with respect for territorial integrity, then the same tomahawks, if given to us, can fly at Moscow. Friends, let's be realistic. Tomahawks will not be sent to Moscow because the story of even deploying tomahawks in Germany was announced, but it has not been continued. So there can be as much wishful thinking as you want, but at this stage we need to understand that the United States will never go for it. I'm sorry, but I still say such harsh things so that we realize the reality here and understand our main task. We need to produce our own missiles and hit Russia with them.
І розуміти своє основне завдання, те, що нам треба виготовляти свої ракети і бити ними по території Росії.
We have developed technologies. So, of course, I do not even rule out that we have such missiles, but why we do not use them, I cannot answer this question at this time. I don't want to build versions here, because this could be some kind of military strategic plan of our military leadership, so I propose to omit it. But the emergence of this information, for me personally, indicates that if such a leak did occur, it is more likely a pass to Putin that we will not be giving such missiles to Ukraine. Of course we can, but we won't, and Putin understands this. I think this is a sign of weakness, a sign of Washington's weakness. I don't see any chance of a positive decision by November 5th due to a lack of progress. Everyone is waiting for the elections. If Kamala Harris makes a decision, it may involve shorter-range missiles rather than tomahawks. Trump's comments are speculative and uncertain, so I would view this material cautiously.
Якщо буде Трамп говорити про це, це знаєте, як гадати на кавовій гущі. Може статися, а може не статися. Тому я цей матеріал розцінював би саме таким чином.
But given the fact that Saudi Arabia is now involved in this process, this story is much more interesting and realistic. What do I mean? Yesterday we analyzed and also mentioned Israel's strikes against Iran. Iran is promising to retaliate against Israel. A new statement has already been made, and there will be attacks. For participants in the oil market, where Saudi Arabia is a key player, the situation in the Middle East is very important, given that oil markets around the world have seen a drop in oil prices after Israel's strike on Iran. This indicates that even military actions do not affect the price of this black gold as much as they used to. Therefore, this is a more powerful argument for putting pressure on Putin than Tomahawk missiles. Let me explain why. Just a month ago, Saudi Arabia announced that it is ready to increase oil production. And this was very unexpected news for me, because it happened in the near future in order to regulate prices in the oil market, where they began to fall significantly and revenues from this seriously sagged. I will not reveal to anyone the secret that the main source of revenue for the Russian budget and the Saudi budget is oil prices. They have constantly reached certain agreements within OPEC that volumes can be lower or higher in order to regulate prices. Now, this whole story, with the decline in oil prices, is useful only for one country, the United States of America, because, against the backdrop of the elections, the Democrats have a chance to win. However, this did not become a decisive factor, and we will not return to the elections now. There were preliminary agreements between the Saudis and Russians to reduce oil production, but Russia likely isn't adhering to them and continues to produce and sell oil as it sees fit, leading to significant market dumping. Russia is not the only factor behind oil prices. Other countries are actively involved in oil production and can regulate it significantly. This gives them leverage to say they are ready to negotiate and pressure Russia. Whereas there were no such official statements before, today they show that they are ready to talk to the Kremlin, but on the terms of force. Let's remember that this story is quite old. Somewhere around the end of 2023, I don't remember exactly, but there was a visit by Putin to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia on the same day. In the United Arab Emirates, Putin was greeted with great pomp, while his visit to Saudi Arabia was more subdued. I believe that increased Saudi oil production and the resulting collapse of Russian oil prices will create a stronger argument to pressure Putin, leading to an irreversible process of hyperinflation in Russia. Yesterday, we discussed these issues when we characterized the state of the economy in Russia. And this is precisely the reason why, as you can see, the Saudis issued a statement by the end of the day. For example, even the head of the party to which German Chancellor Olaf Scholz belongs spoke about this at one time. They named a number of countries that could become negotiators: Turkey, Brazil, and India, among others. But it is clear that the Middle East region is crucial for the stability of the world today. Israel's attack on Iran didn't raise prices, as it's beneficial for the Saudis. If there were a reasonable war, prices could reach $100 per barrel, significantly boosting their budget, but that's not occurring. It's not just war that influences prices. It's also how countries finance their actions, with Russia relying on state budget revenues from oil sales. Russia is redistributing this, let me say, from North Korea, which is gaining strength. If Saudi Arabia makes a decision that the Russians don't like, believe me, the chain reaction will be very serious. The day before, Frankfurter Allgemeine reported that Kyiv might compromise on occupied territories to join NATO. Ukraine is hesitant to initiate negotiations and expects the U.S. to propose protection in exchange for the temporary occupation of territory. Such scenarios seem unrealistic, resembling a childish game of who will propose what. Is it appropriate to seek NATO's Article 5 protection in this situation, given the uncertainty of its effectiveness? Currently, there are no alternatives to the North Atlantic Alliance, which is being discussed in the West regarding the creation of a military bloc. For us, if we're considering a ceasefire, security guarantees are a crucial factor. Notably, Russia emphasizes this, with Putin requesting guarantees that NATO will not attack Russia if he ceases fire. This morbid imagination benefits Russia and Putin's partners who are exploiting it. However, our focus is on Ukraine's security, where guarantees are crucial to prevent further military actions in the territories we control. While NATO membership is a possibility, there is no consensus among NATO members on this issue, especially if we do not control all territories. There are notable opponents, including the U.S. represented by Biden and Trump. We do not know Kamala Harris's position, but I think it is unlikely that we will get a positive decision. Other supporters of Ukraine's non-accession. That's why I think this idea has no prospects at all. This is what is being talked about now. There were more ideas at the Vilnius summit of the North Atlantic Alliance in 2023, when there were some prospects. We actively discussed this, and Biden offered hope by saying to wait a few months, leading me to believe that many colleagues supported the idea of an extraordinary NATO summit where we would be invited. However, just receiving an invitation doesn't matter. Becoming a full-fledged NATO member is a challenging process. It was difficult for Sweden and somewhat easier for Finland, but still not easy. Only then would Article 5 come into effect. Regarding Article 5, NATO has shown limited ability to implement its provisions in practice, and the defense concept established since 1949 is less effective than desired. They are making some changes, such as the Baltic states building fences along their borders with Russia to defend against potential invasions.
для того, щоб починати захищати свою землю з першого метра вторгнення російського агресора.
And even they have already changed the provisions that allow NATO countries to strike at Russian territory in the event of an aggressive war against one of the NATO countries. And only then will they decide who will join, who will help, and so on. In other words, NATO is proving to be ineffective today, and therefore it is rather debatable whether the idea of Ukraine joining NATO and using Article 5 will be successful. It's no coincidence that Mark Rutte met with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen yesterday amid the threat of North Korean troops joining the war against Ukraine, discussing deeper cooperation between the EU and NATO. And even earlier, the European Union formed the EU staff, which is responsible for creating the military forces of the European Union. The continent has about 500 people, but there is another union in Europe, created in 2015 by the UK, known as the Joint Expeditionary Force. This force, led by the UK, includes Northern European countries and the Baltic states. Recently, the president of Ukraine was in Reykjavik, meeting with the Prime Minister of Iceland and other members of Northern Europe, so I do not exclude that this was discussed there. Today, Europe is thinking more and more about how autonomous it can be in terms of security. And it is precisely this kind of indecision by NATO that can really help to reorient Europe to a completely different direction of development, strengthening of defense capabilities, and so on. Yesterday, the new candidate for the post of European Commissioner for Defense said that the main task of the European Union and the European Commission would be to increase defense capacities and production capacities, including increasing weapons production.
Збільшення виробництва зброї. Якщо таку позицію ЄС займе і буде виділяти більше грошей на виготовлення зброї, то, безумовно, це буде кращою гарантією, аніж, до прикладу, ми там станемо членом колись.
If the EU takes this position and allocates more money for weapons production, it will certainly be a better guarantee than, for example, us becoming a member someday. Because no one is talking about membership now. All the articles are about invitations. Even the president of Ukraine, when presenting his victory plan, listed NATO membership as the first point, but not today, after the war. Both Yermak and Zelensky have acknowledged that Ukraine will not join NATO until the war is over. While there have been discussions about Ukraine's membership as a separate territory, this idea is not supported by the authorities and is frequently rejected. Although some in Ukrainian society favor it, there are positive and negative aspects, with the main concern being how Article 5 would be implemented, which raises many doubts. One essential point is that Putin claims he wants to end the war, with the main condition being that Ukraine does not join any military or political blocs. While he continues to mention NATO, we should not accept this. We need to discuss with our European partners the creation of other military and political blocs, especially since Euro-Atlantic cooperation between Europe and the US is weakening. This presents a dilemma. Patriot missiles have not yet arrived in Germany, but North Korean troops are already at our front. CNN confirms this, citing Ukrainian official sources. Reuters reports that President Biden expressed concern about North Korean troops in the area, stating that if they cross the border, Ukraine should retaliate. Patrick Ryder, a spokesman for the U.S. Department of Defense, says that Ukraine can use weapons provided by the U.S. to defend itself against threats that come from abroad or from within, which means we can use U.S. weapons as well. The DPRK Army's involvement in the European war reflects a flaw in Western policy, says Andriy Kovalenko. He warns against underestimating the imported soldiers being trained for combat, as their destruction will require additional resources. It's clear that American media is downplaying the problem due to geopolitical concerns. Additionally, Yonhap reports that North Korea has increased security due to fears of an assassination attempt on Kim Jong Un. Is this related to the deployment of North Korean troops in our territory? This concern and muted reactions highlight Western weakness, signaling to Kim Jong Un and Putin that escalation is possible. The U.S. is concerned while Europe prepares, partly due to uncertainty over future U.S. aid under Trump or Harris.
Я не випадково говорив про те, що в Європі зовсім зараз інший дискурс. Європа схвильована тим, що з приходом Трампа чи Камали Харріс ніхто ж не розуміє, як буде подалі будуватися допомога США.
This is a serious challenge for Europe. Andrzej Duda emphasized yesterday that he is ready to sell his 29 aircraft to Ukraine, with the request to close the skies for now, rather than demanding F-35s as replacements. This reflects Europe's understanding of the increasingly difficult situation in Ukraine. The involvement of North Korean troops is just the beginning of a not-so-attractive story, where Europe will simply be forced to enter the war. When I said just 2 days ago that NATO is now considering going to war, it is true. Mark Rutte, when he met with South Korean intelligence just on Monday, the day before yesterday, he heard a report from South Korean intelligence. Mark Rutte had talks with Ursula von der Leyen on the phone, also with Mark Rutte twice, not once. And all of this indicates that there is a serious problem. But let's not forget one more point about the United States of America. North Korea is a threat in East Asia to South Korea itself. South Korea is well aware that with the deepening cooperation between Kim Jong Un and Putin, Kim Jong Un can get additional means to attack South Korea dangerously. There are many scenarios being modeled of how North Korea can invade South Korea, Japan, and so on. This is a serious scenario that is being considered in the West today. Europe views the situation differently than the United States, which is preoccupied with elections and unrest, reminiscent of past events in Ukraine. It seems Trump employs similar political tactics as Yanukovych, so we likely won't hear a clear response until after November 5th, despite Biden's comments about the need to act. There are significant scandals in the U.S., distracting attention from foreign issues as they focus on power dynamics. In contrast, Europe is approaching the situation differently. We need to intensify our efforts regarding the presence of DPRK military in Russia and Ukraine, and I believe we're effectively raising awareness. Even a Spanish newspaper reported on strikes in the Kursk region where North Korean troops might be located, highlighting the support from Spain. That is, they already exist. No one will ask Trump whether we should hit them or not. He said it, he said it. Unfortunately, you see, at the end of his term, he simply did not go down in history. Ми вже завдали ударів по будинках у Курській області, де могли бути перебувати північно-корейські війська. Тобто вони вже є, Трампа ж ніхто запитувати не буде вже, бити нам по них чи не бити по них. Він сказав, окей, на жаль, він, бачите, на завершення своєї каденції просто не ввійшов в історію, а вляпався. I've mentioned multiple times that he had a unique opportunity to stay out of the conflict, but he chose otherwise. Despite his 50 years of political experience, he hasn't made effective decisions toward the end of his term. However, I'm optimistic. The European Union has sufficient financial resources to deter Russian aggression and is now making decisions, though its bureaucratic system can be slow. The start of negotiations between NATO and the EU says something. Assassination attempt on Kim Jong Un. A recent report noted that Kim Jong Un's security is tightening further. Since 2017, periodic increases in alert levels suggest ongoing concern for his health.
Треба врахувати один момент. Якщо промоніторити повідомлення про те, скільки разів вони посилювали безпеку, то починаючи те, що я бачив з 17-го року, час від часу вони з'являються. Кім Чен Ін реально боїться.
My colleagues and I have discussed the North Korean situation, noting that Kim Jong Un has relatives who also vie for leadership. The occasional drone launches at Pyongyang from South Korea suggest that Kim must fear someone or something. While these are not attack drones, it's worth remembering Israel's success in using various weapons to eliminate leaders of terrorist groups. They don't have nuclear weapons, which is somewhat more difficult for us. But I will say this, at this stage, we can just watch. I wish those who want to achieve results in this sense only success.
На даному етапі ми можемо за цим просто слідкувати. Я бажаю тим, хто хоче відповідних дій досягнути результативних в цьому сенсі, лише успіху.
Thank you very much, Valerie, for today's broadcast. Thank you for your analysis.
Хай щастить.
Valeriy Klochok, head of the Center for Public Analysis Vezha, thanks you for your time. Please like, comment, and subscribe to Klochok Time on YouTube for more analysis. Support helps reach a wider audience. Believe in the armed